feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming at you Saturday morning. It's November 9th, and we are doing a rare Saturday morning pod because of how the schedule worked. The Wolves played in Chicago on Thursday night, and then last night at home against the Blazers. And we wanted to be able to talk about both of these games. I also think Chris and I didn't want to wake up at like 5 a.m. in Chicago on Friday morning and record a pod after that game. So we came back. We took in the Blazers game last night as well. I'm joined by Wolves beat writer Chris Hine, who was also, again, in Chicago. We haven't spent enough time talking to each other over the last 48 hours. So we're going to do about 48 more minutes here. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, Dane. How are you?
Got your coffee.
We're all set to go. Ran out and grabbed it. Mm-hmm.
Look at you.
Super large. We're going Toronto. I've had 2 different Wolves players comment on the size of my coffee at shoot around this season so far.
It is excessive.
It is. But you know what? When you do this job, you gotta be caffeinated. I'm just,
okay.
Especially as you get older
on.
here. Especially as you get older here.
You started drinking coffee like 2 years ago.
I did. But this is the turning point in my life. I'm 37 years old, about to turn 38. I need a little extra energy boost to get through the day anymore. It's just how it is.
Just for the listeners, I thought it was crazy that both Chris and John Krasinski, as of like 2 years ago, did not drink coffee, and I've corrupted you. Now you do.
My trip to Europe 2 summers ago and drinking coffee to get through the day while I was in Europe for 2 weeks because of the time change got me. That's what got me. Yep.
I think it was me, but whatever. That's cool.
Maybe a little bit.
So where I wanted to start today, I get probably unsurprisingly to everyone, is with Ant. There's the 3-point shooting is incredible. The last 2 games he made 14 threes, 5 in Chicago, and then 9 last night against the Blazers. But this really isn't me trying to be like counter whatever. The thing that has stood out to me most about these last 2 games is Ant's competitiveness level, and not the 3-point shooting. I'm not taking away from the 3-point shooting, but I've just kind of gotten used to it. I'm like expecting that to sort of be the norm.
Right.
I mean, at the end of that Chicago game, he hits that 3, right, to kind of seal the game with about a minute and a half left. And he does his little kind of walks around the perimeter of the floor, sort of yelling, like looking into the fans or whatever. And I'm sure a lot of people, think of that as performative or, maybe a little bit of arrogance or whatever. And I'm not saying I'm not saying it's not those things. But for me, honestly, what I was thinking about, Chris, and I think this would resonate with you as well, is that was, particularly that Chicago game, was a midweek game and part of a back-to-back against a not great team.
Right.
And those are the games that we have become accustomed to, or at the beginning of Ant's career, being like, we're probably not getting full throttle Anthony Edwards.
Right.
And when he hit that shot and walked around like that, it's like, okay, cool, whatever. You beat the Bulls. I'm not saying that's some accomplishment, but that to me is a real shift in maturity or whatever. It's a step forward to me in my, I don't know. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen him be like super competitive night to night. Every single playoff game ever, he's locked in. But I don't know if we went through the first 3 years of his career, there's probably 20% of them or something like that sure. He isn't there. And it's standing out to me how consistently high his compete level is this season. I want to acknowledge that because I've definitely pointed out in the past when that hasn't been the case. So I want to get to you talking about this too, because I think you have some perspective on it, especially from the book. But I thought this was an interesting answer from Ant in the locker room after the Chicago game when I kind of asked him about this. Oops. If we can get it to load here in a second. Come on, baby.
Technology.
This is... Yes, the listeners, you like the lead up that I did to that?
building it up with this nice.
Compared to the beginning of your career, like night to night, level at which you're locked in and the importance of winning that night has turned up. Am I correct in saying that?
Hell yeah.
What like has kind of fueled you to do that?
I mean, like I said, I don't want to be a team that's like went to the playoffs a couple times and then don't go back, or been to the Western Conference Finals and don't go back. I don't want to be that guy that like had a moment. Like Draymond we had a great conversation at the USA after the championship game. At the little celebration, he was talking to me on the side, and it was just about like, don't be a moment type of guy. So that's my main goal. Like, I don't want to be a moment where I went to the West Conference Finals one time. I want to be somebody that's like, they know if we coming in, they better be ready to play. So we got to get to that level. We not there yet, and it's on me.
So Chris, again, Thursday, Friday games, a back-to-back against two of the bottom teams in the league. He has 33, 8, and 6 against Chicago on 5 of 9 shooting from deep. And he followed that up last night on a back-to-back, a travel back-to-back with 36, 6, and 5 on 9 of 15 shooting from 3. This is a shift, right? Like, am I wrong in saying that is the more meaningful shift than the 3-point shooting volume and change there? Not that isn't meaningful too, but that's the one that I'm feeling more.
This started last season for them. And Finch directly addressed this when I spoke with him for the book. And because Finch has that kind of rule of threes, as he calls it, like, what are you getting from, a potentially great player every 3 games? Are you getting a great game 1 out of 3? Are you getting it 2 out of 3? Or are you getting a 3 out of 3? Finch said Ant is finally at a 3 out of 3.
Wow.
And what he means by that is the shooting is going to come and go, right? Like, you're going to have bad nights where the shots aren't falling. Game 7 in Denver is the prototypical example of what Finch is talking about. Ant was 6 for 24 in that game, right? Yep. But he did everything else. His energy was there. Defense was there. Leadership was there. He did everything else that still made it a 3 out of 3 kind of performance, even though he wasn't shooting. That is more of what Finch is talking about, and what they have been trying to get Ant to do over the years is, even if your shot's not falling, and his shot's obviously been falling recently, that's not always the marker of if you're there on a given night. They just wanted him to have that compete level up, to have the energy up. And it's finally there on a nightly basis. I mean, look at, like you said, these 2 games are a great example of bottling this. 2 lower in the standing opponents who traditionally he has maybe overlooked, and everybody on the team knows it. A back-to-back, which he had trouble with early in his career, playing on back-to-backs, right? And now look what he's done 2 nights in a row.
69 points.
It's taking that next step of maturity, of giving a crap on a nightly basis. I think one of the things that the Wolves have noticed about Ant is, there's a difference sometimes between hating to lose and loving to win. And I think, for the large part of Ant's career so far, he's hated to lose, but he hasn't always done the necessary things to win. Now and again, I think this starts last season. He's turned the page on that, and he sees what's necessary to win, and he's starting to do those things. And obviously the Olympics just, helped to springboard that. And being around all these great players and having conversations like that with Draymond Green, figuring out, as he was talking about last night, whose shot, might he glean some stuff from, whether it's KD, Steph, and he said Dame was who we ended up taking some stuff from for a shot this season. But it's that emotional, that effort, that energy component that was always missing. Or not always missing, but it was missing on nights like last night.
Occasionally.
And it's there almost all the time now. And he's gotten to that 3 out of 3 point that Finch often has talked about.
That's really good, man. That's perfect, and that sums it up. And I like the way you started it. It started last season. I think You phrased it better than I'm going to. The what was it? The not hating to lose versus wanting to win.
Yeah.
I think that really kind of started clicking in those last 20 games of last season when Carl got hurt. Right. I mean, it's, for me, in my mind, that game in Indiana will always be a shifting point in Ant's career for me. You know, the start of a new chapter. It really, and again, for if people don't remember, that's the night where he gets the game-winning block and he hits his head on the rim. And it's actually not even that moment is where that shifted for me. For me, my mentality on Ant shifted at the beginning of that game because there's 20 games left in the season. Carl was out like pretty indefinitely, and it was a reason to kind of let a little bit of the air out of the sails or whatever of what that season could be. And Ant right then wanted to win. And that game, he wants to win. He does win, and plays one of his most competitive games that I've seen. But that was, was a singular instance, at that time. And then there just kept being more and more consistency to that. And to the winning point, we get to the first round of the playoffs, right? And his commitment to playmaking, given the way that Phoenix was guarding him, wasn't a hate to lose move. It was a winning move. You know what I'm saying? Right. And that was another shift for me in my perception of Ant. Quite frankly, two pretty big ones in what would that be? 2 months time?
2 month period. Yeah. By the way, in that Indiana game, he goes for like 40, I think that night. Looking back on that game, he got hurt. He got hurt twice in that game. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
in the first half, he went off twice with two different injuries. Like he stepped on somebody's foot
right away in the first quarter.
ankle, right, and then I think he landed hard at another point in the game and had to come out. And then he still came back.
Yeah, two of the Ant locker room.
Two of the Ant locker room, right? And so
I had one of those last night too.
You're sitting there thinking, oh my, the season might, as you might sometimes do, the season might be over because Carl had just gotten hurt. Now Ant's in a ton of pain, and he comes back and does what he does. That whole road trip, by the way, that road trip started in Indiana with the block, and that ended in Utah with the John Collins dunk. That was all the same 6-game road trip. That was a very defining road trip, and I think in Ant's career.
It was a chapter turn, man. And then the playoffs were too. And now, I don't know, what 5 months since the playoffs, I'm seeing another chapter turn.
Yeah,
and this one doesn't. And this chapter turn is about the compete level. It's also about the 3-point shooting, but it's changing, and we're starting to do the thing with the book where we kind of like flip through the pages pretty quickly. You know what I'm saying? And it's like
the metaphorical book, not my book. Yeah.
Yes, it could be. But I mean, kind of actually the book that is Ant, and it's going faster, and that's Superstar Ascension. I think that's whatever. That's my analogy for Superstar Ascension. And the most important to me factor is not switching the shot mechanics. It's not, it's not leadership. It's simply the choice to compete at a extremely competitive level, night in and night out, which sounds so much easier said than done. And I know, I mean, you in particular have such a good reference point of the difficulty of bringing your best in an NBA season when you're traveling as much as you are and as condensed as the games are. It's just, for me, I don't travel as much as you, but that experience for me has really grown my appreciation for consistently high level basketball. And you feel that most in back-to-back.
I mean, I often get notes about my compete level on back-to-backs when
it's low.
Submitting my stories.
It's like,
Chris, your compete level tonight just wasn't there. I also remember a moment from the road last year, and it was like a shoot around, or it was something, I forget what it was, pregame something, and Ant was working out with Chris Hine, his player development coach, and I remember Chris was just like kind of challenging Ant and getting on him and saying like, what version of you are we getting tonight? Are we getting like 4 for 18 or what are we getting? I think it was in Denver or something like that, but I think it was on a back-to-back maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just issuing a simple challenge to him, and basically saying, hey, this team needs you tonight. We need you to come out and play, overcome whatever sluggishness or tiredness or whatever that you're feeling, and you need to put up a good game. Now listen, again, the shooting might not always be there. It's just a fact of life in the NBA, but all the other things is what this team is talking about. And like we said, that's seemingly there, along with a growing voice in leadership. And I think maybe that goes hand in hand, where it's like, he's growing in his leadership of the team, and that also really began last year. So maybe with that added responsibility is you got to back up what you're talking.
Totally.
You got to be the one that's on point, because if you're going to call out other guys for lack of energy on the defensive end or whatever, right, you gotta be right there with them. You gotta be giving your 110%. So maybe before he didn't always have to do that because he wasn't the one holding people accountable all the time. Maybe like year 2, early year 3, but now in year 5, that's more the case.
And who this had to be most tenuous for and has felt it the most is Finch, and has had to be kind of patient with that process as well. I asked him about Ant's compete level as well. See if we can. God dang, what is going on with my stuff today? Sorry, everyone. I'm not editing this. It's Saturday.
You're like my dad with technology.
Ant's night-to-night compete level change in your time that you've coached him.
No, I mean, it's high level right now. As a young player, he was he competed when the ball was involved, all the time. But he would have lapses, even at that. And but it's he's just way more consistent. Understands now that how important he is to our defense, and he used to pick and choose like when he would ramp it up, and now it's just more regular. It's getting better and better, and even off the ball, he's way more aware and engaged.
I think that's a great point of it too, right, Chris? Is that it's in pretty much all aspects of the game.
Right.
Last night, it really popped in right away at the beginning of the first quarter. His defensive compete level, when the night before in Chicago, he was like, I don't know what the hell we're doing. We're not competing defensively in the first quarter ever. And what he said then goes, that's on me. And then he follows that up. And in the first quarter, clearly the compete level was night and day different from his first quarter in Chicago, which was bad, to his first quarter against Portland last night. It's just all, I don't know how many different ways I can say it. It's all just sinking in better. But I appreciate that color from Finch too.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly, kind of what we were talking about before. Like Finch said, he used to pick and choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's more consistent, the 3 out of 3 thing.
Yeah.
I think always with Ant is the main way he has led. Yes, he's becoming more vocal as a leader with this team, but the main way he has always led and affected a team in his career is with his energy. Mm-hmm. Like when he has that ability to uplift and inspire people with his energy, right? And you see it when he's up off the bench cheering for teammates, doing all that. But if he's going out there like he did last night and setting the tone defensively, it's going to pick everybody else up. Right. I know he said they see he sees the energy of Jaden on defense, and that's what carries them. Well, I would also say, I think the team follows Ant when it goes both ways. That too. It goes both ways. So when they see him and his give a crap factor is really high, you can't help but have to fall in line behind that.
And that has, at least thus far, clearly been happening. We'll get to the 3-point volume, but we're going to grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. I'm going to be bugging you about this all week that Kyle Tighe and I will be at Treasure Island Resort and Casino doing a live show next Friday, November 15th. The Wolves play the Kings that night at 9 p.m. It's a West Coast game in Sacramento, so it doesn't start till 9, late tip. So we thought it'd be a perfect time to get together and do a live show. And so the plan is that we will kind of get there, start doing a happy hour at 7, and then kind of between 7:30 and 8, as people start to file in, we'll do a live show that'll kind of take us right up to game time, and we'll hang out there at Treasure Island to and through the game. And we would love as many of you as possible to come down. It is a bit of a hike down to Treasure Island, so your attendance does certainly mean a lot to us. If it is a far drive for you, and you maybe if you want to stay the night there, they're offering a promotion for listeners. If you call Treasure Island at 1-888-867-7829, mention code Dane, they will give you 15% off a room. Again, that's November 15th. Wolves, Kings, 9 p.m. We'll start a live show, Kyle and I, about 7:30, 8 o'clock there. Come early to hang out. We are looking forward to it. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. I'll give you two quick prize picks for Sunday. Chris, I have a question for you. Christian McCaffrey, 94.5. You're a 49ers fan, if listeners don't know this.
Right.
94.5 total yards. Do you expect McCaffrey to get a big workload right away?
I haven't been reading the reports out of San Francisco, but I feel like if McCaffrey is good to go, Kyle Shanahan is going to be using him a lot, and especially because they don't have Brandon Ayuk. I think Kyle Shanahan has been waiting for Christian McCaffrey to come back so he could give him 25 touches a game. So I'm gonna go over. Go over. Yeah. Kyle Shanahan loves Christian McCaffrey. So go over.
Yes. And you're
also you don't want to be, as we were discussing the other night, you don't want to be going under and then somebody has a Jamar Chase kind of game and you're just sitting there feeling like an idiot the whole time, right?
You should have seen Chris and I in the media room in Chicago, because we didn't get to watch any of that game, and I pulled up the app and I was like, "Is this right, Chris? Does Jamar Chase have 11 catches for 259 and 3 touchdowns?" We did. Neither of us saw that. Okay, so we'll take McCaffrey to have more than 94.5 total yards rushing plus receiving, and then I'll say that Tyrone Tracy scores a touchdown against the Panthers. I think they're playing in Germany there too. But there's a whole slate up there. You can mix in a basketball pick or Wolves picks there as well, and make a Sunday slate of your lineup. As always, I use promo code Dane if you're new to creating an account on Prize Picks. That way you'll get $50 instantly credited to your account when you make your first $5 wager. All right, Chris, let's talk about threes. Anthony Edwards takes a million of them. He took 24 in the last 48 hours, 14 for 24. Obviously, he is, and his 3-point volume is changing the complexion of the Wolves offense. But they're also, just as a team, bombing. They are bombing threes. They've shot 45.1% of their shots from three this season. Last year, Boston led the league in that 3-point rate, 3-point frequency. Boston led the league at 43.7%. So they are shooting more threes than last season's Boston Celtics did. Now this season, Celtics are shooting even more of them. but this is a pretty unprecedented team volume that I want to hear your take on it, the ant element of it. But also, this is a team that bombs threes and will continue to bomb threes. It seems pretty clear.
It just seems like it's the convergence of a lot of different things at the right time. Okay. Whether it's Ant becoming dedicated to taking more threes, whether it's the acquisition of Julius Randle in helping facilitate more threes.
Big one.
And I think that's a big part of this. And I don't know if Ant comes into this season, before the trade, does he have the same mindset, or did this click in after the trade because it was like, Julius is going to get you some open looks from 3-point range, you should probably think about
I don't
taking
think
more. And
that's
I think these things happen independent of each other,
I
right?
agree.
I think this is, like I said, this is the convergence of two really important things that have happened for this team. And I think I was watching it last night and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, this reminds me of a little bit of what the offense looked like 3 years ago.
Yeah,
when they did have the number one offense from January onward. I'm like, this aesthetically just looks like that a little bit more. And kind of the prototypical Finch ball that, that they were playing then. And that kind of got gummed up a bit with the acquisition of Rudy and trying to make that fit alongside Karl. If Karl is still here, I do not think this team is playing as wild and free from 3-point range as it is right now.
Which hold on, that right there, like that's just that 15 seconds. Like that was not the public opinion of what was going to happen when Karl Anthony Towns.
No, it wasn't. And I think even I thought so, but it's seemingly through 9 games now. Like I think the offense has taken some major steps forward, and I think it's been looking pretty good. I mean, we were just talking before, they're 5th in efficiency right now. And it's coming along. And I think the defense right now is the bigger concern. And I don't think we would have been saying that a month ago.
But Chris, it is the other things. It's the ant, and we'll talk about the defense later. I'm talking about the 3-point volume. It's the Julius part of it, and that teams just continue to converge on him. But
also, I mean, you have also Dante replacing Kyle Anderson from last season in the rotation, so to speak, and that's 7, 8, 9 3 attempts last night.
Kyle didn't shoot any. No,
right,
exactly. I think Dante was double digits last night too.
That's right. I think
it was covered up by
4 for 11. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
It's all these. It's like the obvious ones of okay, you switch out Dante, who shoots for Anderson, who obviously shoots more. Ant has doubled his volume or whatever. But there's these other that just like stylistic to your Finch ball thing. The collapsing the paint around Randall and him being somebody who can kick it out. I think we often would like talk about the ball getting sticky with Ant and Cat last year. Sometimes the ball would get sticky. I mean, there wasn't as many of these touches, but when Rudy would catch the ball, it would stop.
It's not stopping now.
And it's not. He's catching one. That's big, which we just probably haven't acknowledged enough. We're just catching the ball a lot more this year and catching it with the intention of continuing to move it. These are all things that are flow that equal the a more of a wide open floor. And that's what Finch kind of pointed to, the impact of Ant's threes and the threes as a whole. I'll play that clip.
Talked a lot about it, but Ant with 9 threes, just, I mean, what is that doing for this offense in general to kind of open things up and help
makes the floor huge, right? He's got great range. He's taking them in the flow of the offense. He's reading the coverages and pick and roll really well right now. He's been at a high level. His catch and shoot is off quick, and it's adding not to just a lot of threes, but a lot of efficient offense.
It's just the idea of a more open floor is leading to less of those periods of time that we got used to seeing so often last season, where the offense just got so average, just so unimposing given its talent. The more open floor allows players, Ant, Julius, whoever, go down the line, Rudy for sure, to more put their offensive talent forward. And stylistically, this is just fitting this group so much better than I don't even know what to explain what the stylistic goal was of that Wolves team last season, because I think they were fighting themselves all the time on what even are we offensively. And I don't know if it's exactly this volume or whatever that is going to be that. We talked so much about defensive identity last season. I know people kind of roll their eyes at identity and stuff overall, but I think you get what I'm getting at. Is it just feels like this Wolves team has a better, not perfect, but a clearly better idea of what they want to be offensively to tap into everything they are. And yeah, Ant has been the primary instigator of that.
Ant is making quicker decisions too. He's more intentional. He's quicker when he gets the ball in his hands. And maybe that comes along with being able to better read defenses and what they're doing to you.
Right.
Instead of trying to be more deliberate and like maybe seeing him work through his paces and like, okay, so if I do this guy's going to come over. Like, I think it's just more natural now, and he knows what to do. And using Rudy's screening, I mean, he's become really masterful at kind of faking.
You remember how
out.
we talked about this exactly before the Sacramento game when we were in Sacramento, we did the pod, and we were like, is Ant gonna be able to do this where he's using his offense, he's putting himself in a position that opens himself up for teammates? And we're like,
and he is.
I don't know, and that was 2 weeks ago. Like,
and he is, and he's doing a great job of it. He's doing a great job. And he's like, to Finch's point, he's reading coverages at a super high level. He's seen everything. He's gotten to that point where everything is a little more instinctual, and that enables the quicker decision making.
Right.
And and it's again the other convergence thing that maybe factor number 3 here is the Rudy thing, which is, Ant is finding him more. Everybody's kind of finding him a little better. Like Dante and Rudy have an instant chemistry. It appears, and so with Rudy being as involved and as important a piece in the offense as he's ever been, I feel like that's part number 3 of this kind of convergence is making sure that Rudy is not dragging down the offensive ball movement and helping to facilitate it. And that's exactly what's happened, because the other part of that fourth quarter in Chicago was Ant and Rudy had 2 nice finds. Like, Ant found Rudy for 2 easy buckets, I think, in that fourth quarter there. And that was another part, because they blitzed Ant a couple times and Ant just got off of it. And Rudy had a 3-point play on one of them. And then he had a nice kind of tip in at the rim on the other. It's been all those things coming together. And it really, I think it's a cause for, a little bit of excitement if you're a Wolves fan right now, that I think this thing is coming together on the offensive end of the floor.
I asked Rudy in the locker room in Chicago after the game if this is the most or best chemistry he's had offensively with his teammates in his time in Minnesota.
Like, as good of a chemistry as you've had with offensively for you with your teammates since you've been here? It just seems like everybody can find you, and that hasn't always been the case.
For sure. I mean, I can sense that guys, when they drive and get in the paint, they're really confident. Find me and even in the pocket, they know that most of the time I'm going to make the right play, and that's the work. I've been working a lot on these situations, and it's great to have their trust. I think when the game flows and the ball moves like that, it's really, really hard to guard us, because it's really unpredictable. If the team want to collapse in the paint when I roll, we're going to get threes, and if they want to, let me roll to the basket, we're going to punish them in the rim. So I think we still got room to grow, but I think you're right. That's probably the best.
Do you think it's because you've been passing as much and as well as you have? Like, does it kind of go both ways like that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I think when guys know good things happen, they're gonna naturally more pass it to you. But I also think we got guys that have been putting the work and that have been able to see. Because sometimes it's not that they don't want to pass; it's just that some guys like are not able to see those passes. But I feel like, whether it's Jaden, Dante, like all these guys are able to now be confident in throwing passes, and great passes, not just passes. So it makes us harder to guard.
Chris, you brought up the 3 years ago. Oh wait, was that pre-Rudy? I'm thinking about the second
3
half
years ago was pre-Rudy. Yeah.
Yeah, but the second half of the first Rudy season, the offense was better as well, and that sort of coincided with greater, or maybe just less bad, Rudy offensive involvement that season. Because remember the first year they were like posting him up a lot.
But that was
like,
also
Rudy's a part of this, I guess, is the good offense over his time here. there's been better versions of Rudy, better chemistry with Rudy, and I think this.
Yeah.
Wait, he said so. It's the best chemistry he's had.
That was that also coincided with Carl being out.
Yeah.
You know, that 2 years ago. But it also coincided with Ant taking a step forward in his career at that moment in time, which was having the ball a lot in his hands.
Sure.
Really having to read defenses more. And that culminated in Ant getting his first All-Star appearance that season.
Right.
So it's you don't want to say it's hard. I don't want to say it's all because of the too big thing that the offense, was kind of stuck in the mud at times last year, but it just seemed like they never figured out the spacing, right?
Yeah.
And that was always a constant complaint that we heard throughout those 2 years, and Finch especially was like, it took a long time just to figure out the spacing, and then Carl went out and they had to figure it out again, and then coming into last year they kind of had to figure it all out again, but they seem to have solved it this year.
Well, and that's a Julius thing. Like,
Right.
and I think what we've all kind of taken in is Julius is less of a big than we thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the exact way that you're talking. Like, I mean, Julius really is a forward, and who is a force physically underneath when he gets there. But like, that's kind of the interesting thing of watching a player more often. We would see a lot of highlights of Julius, right? And so many of them were the highlights of him in New York were in those physical bully ball situations. But watching him play all of his minutes in all of the games, we're seeing, that's actually only some of his possessions that are like that. The majority of his possessions actually remind me of Kyle Anderson. I mean, a souped up version of that, but in the context of this team. And we know that a lot of the best stretches over the last 2 seasons included Kyle Anderson, even at times offensively. I mean, his shooting would sink it at times, but when the shooting wasn't as much of a problem for Kyle, when he would be in, more willing situations to shoot, or just not in the corner as much, kind of playmaking, being the ball handler. Remember when like Kyle would be point slow-mo?
2 years ago.
Like there was good offense out of that. And there is an element of that is that it's not too strict bigs. Because Carl did not, right? Like Carl was, it's not like Carl couldn't handle and like get downhill, but Carl wasn't a point power forward.
Carl wasn't always thinking first of creating for others when he would go downhill, right?
He was a scorer.
He was good at it. He was a scorer, and that's not to take away from him. It's just a different mindset and mentality.
Style, yeah.
That seems to be fitting Julius in this offense maybe a little better than that was. But the trade-off has been so far they're not as good defensively,
right?
And that has been the trade-off. And can they get to
good transition? Chris. There you go.
And can they get to that level of being top 10 in each category, and maintaining that in kind of inefficiency, which is where you want to be generally if you're thinking about making another deep playoff run, is you got to have both areas at least in the top 10, and preferably have one in the top 5.
Yeah, I think it's interesting from the defensive perspective of there's a regular season element of this, that the defense needs to get better for them to have a higher seed in the Western Conference, which is important. And I think is probably one of the main things we should be tracking over the next 5 months of the regular season, whatever. There is, the playoffs where Rudy will play more, and there are less guys, or you'll just be more turned up defensively. And I have a little bit less concern about the issues that we're seeing defensively from this team really popping up in the playoffs, because it is so often just the non-Rudy minutes. But it's the most glaring weakness to me of this team is, and I've had this as a segment, 3 or 4 times this season already, of just like the non-Rudy minutes defensively, the Reed Randall front court, and amidst 2 nice wins against the Bulls and the Blazers, even that Hornets game, like the defense is just not there when Rudy is off the floor. And when we talk about them kind of, continuing theoretically to roll after this easier stretch of time in the schedule, and they start playing more difficult teams, or even Miami, on Sunday, there has just got to be a little, I mean, I guess that's my question to you, is like, how far away are the non-Rudy minutes, the Naz Reid at center minutes, away from being honestly like even competent? Because it's been and again,
do you have the numbers
scoring?
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
I haven't pulled them up, but I have looked before,
yeah,
and they're not good. And this is also one that it's eye test. I mean, Naz at the rim these last two games just wasn't there. I mean, he was there, it was like present but not around. And he seems confused about when to leave the big. When a guy's coming down to provide help, which is the thing that it's tough on Naz, because that's the stuff that Rudy's best at, right? That kind of playing to sort of deal. So it pops so much more. So maybe I am overblowing it in that sense. But I guess that's my point, is it is just a jarring juxtaposition of the defense with Rudy on without Rudy on.
Well, I think, to be fair to Naz, they're asking him to do something he hasn't had to do for 2 years.
Yep.
Right? He has played the 4 for most of the last 2 seasons, right? And now he's toggling back and forth between the 4 and the 5. And so with that comes different defensive responsibilities based on whether he's the 4 or the 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just been a readjustment for him.
Yeah.
And
Britt asked Finch about that
Yeah.
last night. I'm not gonna play the clip, but just to for listeners, I thought it was Britt framed his question of, Naz was priming his body this offseason to play,
right,
to play forward, and Finch goes, yup. And then Britt proceeds to ask about, what are the keys to make the defense work with him out there. But I even just think that yup from Finch at the beginning of that answer was telling, in that he's acknowledging that this is a shift for Naz. And this is a negative externality. The quickness of it from the cat trade is how much Naz has been shifted into a different role that he just straight up wasn't planning for, and thus hasn't been prepared to do.
Yeah, so it's just going to take, I think it's going to take Naz some time to figure this all out and just get reacclimated to what he has to do at both ends of the floor, especially on the defensive end. I remember asking him about it, I think, at a practice earlier this season. And, and he gave a very, from what I remember, the typical answer, like, it's not a huge deal, this and that, used to it, whatever. But
what that reminds me of, though? Remember when Kyle had to start playing the 3 last year, Kyle Anderson?
Yeah.
And the whole time he was like, oh, no, it's all the same, basketball player, this and that. And then we got to like the trade deadline, and he's like, I'm struggling with playing small forward versus power forward. It reminds me of that.
And then when Carl got hurt and he was playing more of the 4, it was more of a natural fit for Kyle during that stretch that Carl was out.
The problem is that's not coming for Naz, right? Like, and people can be out there being like, oh, this team needs to trade for a backup center and another rim protector for when Rudy's not out there. Well, I would go, well, what would you then? Who's not playing? Is Nikhil not playing then? If you go and sign Bismack Biyombo to defend the rim, like, that's not happening. Like, as long as it is these 8 guys on the roster, like, why this is so important is they have to figure out Naz at the 5, because Rudy's gonna miss 15 minutes a game and probably miss full games at some point too. So you need to figure out how to play defense when Rudy's not on the floor, and the infantry isn't coming to some extra sort of backup. The only other backup center on the team is Luka Garza,
right? Who
is Naz Reid. He's a completely offensively tilted player who gives you effort defensively, and that's it. That's kind of where Naz is at right now as well. I don't know, man.
I think I'm willing to give Naz some more time to figure it out, because I think he's shown a great adaptability in his career so far to take on different roles and excel in those roles. So I'm give him another 20-ish games, I think, to really try to feel his way in this new sort of reality that he's in right now. Because I think, and the fouling last night was pretty glaring with him. You know,
Finch mentioned that too.
he was out of position, and you know, reaching and weight. It reminded me of watching him earlier in his career when that was more of a problem.
You mean when he played center?
When he played center. Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. But again, he hasn't done it in a long time.
Yeah.
And so
I agree.
the muscle memory just hasn't been there over the last couple
Look,
of
man,
seasons.
we all, everybody believes in Nas's work ethic.
Yeah.
And his adaptability. Like, those are the things that have defined his ascension from undrafted player to where he is today. I just wonder if physically, like, he can do it, you know, and I'm just, given how much his body has changed, that isn't, you can't just focus in and be 18 pounds heavier and stronger, you know, like, he's not going to change his body.
Right.
So physically he is what he is. And that to me means that they need to have a different style of defense when he's out there. And I know that was a whole big thing the first Cat and Rudy year, where they tried to flip defensive, you know, the toggle, right? The different defensive schemes when it was Rudy out there versus Cat, and that flopped miserably. But I don't know. I mean, that's at least on my mind, that, like, the best way to get this Nas at the 5 group would to get back to more of that fly around energy defensively and less of the conservatism that they're great at with Rudy out there. Cat switched to the more conservative, more frequent drop coverage in the second year, and it worked. But Carl weighs 25 more pounds than Nas, is taller than Nas. Like, it's just has played more center than Nas. It's just, this is the way that Nas is not poor man's Karl Anthony Towns, right? In so many ways he is, right? And that's the thing he's been groomed to be since he's been with the Wolves. But I don't know, that this part, the physical part, is just different to me. And I think that's kind of like the fundamental, like, I'm not sure that part can change in the way that maybe it needs to.
Well, and that's the whole point. I mean, the Wolves want to be a physical team. They want to be, you know, initiating contact and making you work on the defensive end of the floor. And that lineup, or that mix of players when Rudy's not on the floor, doesn't have that feature.
Yep.
And especially if you end up going zone in those situations, that's even more of a passive kind of defense. So, which
they've done a lot of. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they've done. I don't know if they've done a lot of it, but
they have done in those situations. To your point, though, it would seem like the fly around, aggressive, super aggressive mentality is what they would need, but we know that can be a problem to implement because coverages are different.
Yeah.
What you're doing on screens is different, and it just might confuse everybody if you're playing two different ways.
I agree with that, but how about this though? As to argue with ourselves, 2 years ago when they couldn't do it, and so many of the players talked about how it was hard to flip that switch from Rudy's at the 5 versus Cat's at the 5 and the different things I have to do. That was 2 years ago. So for Anthony Edwards, he's 21. And as we started the whole beginning of this episode with, was not processing things at the level that he was processing things. Jade McDaniels is 2 years younger too, right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure.
Maybe there's
you have Mike Conley out there and Dante DiVincenzo, and not D'Angelo Russell.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And maybe this group has a greater ability to have that dynamism to the defense that previous group didn't have because it was 2 years younger. Like, I don't know. I understand why it wouldn't be Finch's instinct to go back to that, because it was a serious problem. It really dysregulated that whole defense for the first half of that season. There was there was no defensive identity, which was crazy on a Rudy Gobert team. But I don't know. It's just going to be interesting when they have a stretch of games against teams that are as good as this stretch of teams have been bad, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so let's revisit it. Let's revisit that then. But I don't know. That's something I've heard of. I've thought of. Last thing on defense. What about, forget about the Nas part of it, or like let's just think about the Rudy minutes. How much has that gotten better for you over these last 2 or 3 games? Because that
The
part
rookie
wasn't
minutes,
great.
that part has gotten better. Yeah, I mean, well, it got better last night. It wasn't good in Chicago, but it got better last
until
night
the fourth quarter, or
and it was
whatever.
better on Monday against
Charlotte.
Charlotte as well. So 2 out of the last 3 games, I would label as plus defensive performances with 1 bad one in there.
Yeah, I would too. So we're not crowning that group either, but maybe giving it like the green arrow up, but like in a light green font or something.
The arrow is pointing slightly up after
after
this week, and we'll see where it's at in coming games here. But
critical though, right?
Critical, but also critical. That you have this stretch to help it find its footing. Like you've got this weird 3 out of 4 series against Portland, which should be 3 wins, right? With Miami mixed in, we'll see what. I think Jimmy got hurt last night potentially. Somebody was saying
preemptively.
Right. But then later this month and then early next month you have a tougher stretch of the schedule where you have you're playing the Lakers,
like
you got Boston. Boston's on the schedule. You got a doubleheader in Golden State, early December as well. So, in a few weeks, the schedule does ramp up a little bit. But I think it's a good time now for this defense to try to find its footing again, to try to be able to stack some wins while it's doing that. And then, by the time they emerge from this stretch, it's going to be game, 12, 13, 14, 15 by the time you play Boston.
Yeah.
And so by the time you hit that Boston game, where are you at?
Right.
And I think that'll be a true, that game will obviously be a true test maybe of where they're at this point in the season, assuming everybody's healthy for that game.
Yeah, I do. That's a good way to put it. Like, I like the timing of that. Like, you got a few more here against middle to lower of the pack teams. Before
I think with the game against the Kings will be a good test of this because the Kings, they had to outscore them in that game to win that one.
That's a good point.
The second game of the season, and that's a team that's going to test a lot of different things about them.
Right. You have anything else from the last 2 games? Let people know about the newsletter thing.
Yes, we're launching a newsletter this week at the Star Tribune.
Let's go.
Free to sign up. It's going to be every Tuesday. That's our target, and it's going to be kind of unique content, #content, to your inbox every Tuesday. Maybe some stories, analysis, tales from the road, personal anecdotes, all that fun stuff. Links to our coverage at the Star Tribune and mailbags as well. So, the other thing I want to encourage you is, I'll put out a feeler on Twitter for this, but some reader questions as well that we'd love to answer and make this an interactive kind of thing. And if anybody has any suggestions for what they might want to see or things that, they might want us to cover, please let me know. We're looking to make this as idealized for the fan experience as possible.
Right. I think it's cool. Like, one thing I like about you and Jace and Britt being able to do the show is you guys getting to show like different areas of your skill sets as reporters. You know what I'm saying? Or just personality. And sometimes when you have to write as much as Chris does, right? And it's kind of just the straight reporting of the game. And I think what'll be cool about this is Chris will be able to write in more and different ways and has such such unique access to the team in the volume of time that he spends around them. So this is like, I think in today's day and age, some of the most valuable content is the personal anecdotes, right? And that what you're able to take in from the road. So I do think that this is going to be a really additional and unique thing to Wolves coverage, and it's free, right?
It's free. Sign up. I tweeted out a link yesterday. I'll do it again. Probably when you tweet out the link to this podcast, maybe I'll include the link to sign up for it as well. And it's free. So, sign up for it. And, I think it's also indicative of just talking a little bit about Star Tribune internal thought right now. The fact that we're launching a Timberwolves newsletter, I think, tells you that, interest in the Wolves. We would not be doing this if there wasn't significant interest in Wolves coverage, or that people aren't responding to our coverage. This is, we hope to have a sponsor for this, all those things. So if you can help make that happen for us, that would be great. And it's a sign of where I think the demand for Wolves content is right now.
Good point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. It's it's gonna be there's gonna be a lot this season. There's just a lot when a team is better, right? Every
it's
game.
Good. It's honestly, little journalistic baseball here. As journalists, we are objective. We're not rooting for anybody. That's our job. But I've been a sports writer now for almost 15 years, right? Mm-hmm. And it just, when a team is better, it's better for readership, it's better for subscriptions, it's better for clicks, it's better for all of it. When a team is successful and winning, it just is. Even though you're not rooting for them, it flat out just is better for the bottom line of the people that are covering them.
It's also way better for going into the locker room and asking questions after games.
Everybody's happier.
Yeah. I mean,
listen, we've had plenty of those days.
Honestly, that sucks when you're like, all right, that's 8th loss in a row, Carl. Like, what do you think it's going to take to get the rebounding better? Like those questions, like that is hard. It's nice to not have as much of that.
Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. It's when the vibes are high, it's a lot easier to do your job like that.
Vibes are high.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the vibes are high. It's Saturday morning. Thank you, seriously, Chris. Thank you for making this happen on a Saturday morning. I don't really know how we would have logistically figured this out, needing to travel back from Chicago without you doing it. So always appreciate you doing it. And again, for all you listeners, a good way to say thank you to Chris is to sign up for a free newsletter. I don't think that's too much to ask, and I really do think it's something you will get value out of. So do that. You could find Chris on Twitter at Christopher Hine. That'll probably be the easiest way to find the link, but I'm sure you can find that on the Star Tribune as well if you don't have Twitter or X. But yeah, thank you again for doing it, Chris. Next up for us, the plan is on Monday after Wolves Heat. Jason and I will do a pod Monday morning, and then rest of the week I'll be in Portland with Kyle, and we'll do pods there as well. Again, you can follow Chris on Twitter at Christopher Hine. Until Monday with Jace, he's Chris, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah. Hope you dancing like nobody else around.